Good morning on this Sunday, October 18th, and welcome to the Georgia Gang. Early voters in Georgia are waiting in lines and shattering records. Georgia's U.S. Senate races are also breaking records as the top candidates rake in millions of dollars. And big news on the healthcare front as Governor Kemp announces his plan to insure more Georgians. Theron, Phil, Janelle, and Kathy are all here as we continue our social distancing. The debate and discussion begin right now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
We knew early voting in Georgia would draw the crowds. We just didn't know how big. First day numbers broke records, 128,000 voters on Monday. The previous record was 91,000 on 2016.
Voting should not be this way. I feel like this specific process is extremely antiquated.
All over Georgia, this was the scene at early voting locations. As frustrated as they were, hundreds of thousands of voters waited in these lines to cast their ballots. Wait times decreased for many as the week went on. Many metro area counties included wait times on their websites to help voters plan. And Secretary of State Raffensperger says the election software provider increased bandwidth to help the check-in process, which contributed to the long waits.
Georgia voters are excited and setting records every hour. And this is all during a pandemic, lest we forget.
According to the website Georgia Votes, turnout so far is 165% higher than in 2016. So Theron, we'll start with you this week. What do you think these numbers tell us, if anything, when it comes to Democratic turnout?
Well, it's great news for Democrats in Georgia. We believe that a lot of these people who are voting are our voters. These are Democratic voters who are very excited to go out and vote for Biden-Harris and Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock. But also one of the things that concerns me, Lori, is that in 2020, and we've had several bites at the apples, we should not have people waiting in line for 10 hours. Now, to be fair here, we did know that there were a lot of communications that went out to encourage people to go to certain polling places. But I just encourage the people who, for whatever reason, unfortunately, had to leave the line because it was too long. Please, please make sure you go back and vote. And huge shout out to the poll workers because they have a very, very tough task ahead.
Yeah, and I think, as I mentioned, as the week went on, the lines got shorter. But Phil, data shows Republicans really like to vote on Election Day. Things may be a little bit different this year because of COVID-19. What's your take on these turnout numbers?
That's right, Lori. Republicans generally do like to vote on Election Day, but what Republicans are seeing statewide is a lot of the mail-in ballots are being used by Republicans, and a lot of the in-person vote is occurring. As of Friday, 1 million people had already cast a ballot, which again is incredible and record-breaking. And you mentioned, Lori, the GeorgiaVotes.com. I would tell viewers they really need to check on that if they're interested in how their county is doing. It lists all 159 counties. It breaks it down by race. In fact, I have to tell Theron, I'm very excited about the Republican turnout. You can tell from key Republican solid counties, like Forsyth County in the important 7th District. Forsyth County, it's off the charts, and that's very gratifying for Republicans, and I could cite other areas too.
Janelle, we've got a lot to talk about this week, so I want to look at the new Quinnipiac poll that was out. Here in Georgia, Joe Biden, they have at 51%, and this is a state that Donald Trump won by 5 points. So do these numbers jive with what you're seeing and feeling out there?
No, so the polling that I'm going by is the polling of bodies, and that's when I look at the event. Like, I was at the Donald Trump Jr. event, and it was a packed house, in comparison to the Jill Biden event. There are people that are showing up in droves, even right now. I was just telling my husband, I'm pretty sure there are people lined up to see the president tonight as we're taping on a Friday in Macon. And so I'm looking at that type of polling. I know a lot of Republicans have told me personally that they don't feel comfortable polling. I know we've talked about that before. So I'm not trusting those polls no more than I trust them in 2016. But I'm excited. I'm optimistic. And I think it's pretty funny to hear the Democrats now tell people to go vote when they were telling us all to stay home and vote by mail.
Kathy, let's take a look at these poll numbers from your perspective. Joe Biden at 51, Donald Trump at 44. If Joe Biden wins Georgia, and we know that early on, does he have any chance?
Does Trump have any chance?
Does who have any chance?
Does
Joe
Trump have
Biden
any
sure
chance?
has a chance if
Yeah.
he wins. Yeah, of course he does. The big question is Florida. If Trump doesn't win Florida, he won't win the election. But if Georgia is lagging a little bit behind a couple of other states, North Carolina, Arizona, Pennsylvania. So if Biden wins Georgia early on, it means he has likely won those other states, which means the road to victory for Trump is very, very challenging. But Georgia alone won't predict, but it will sure show the trend that will likely end in the win.
Phil, what do you think about that? I mean, as Janelle mentioned, Donald Trump in Georgia again on Friday. Does this signal the president is in trouble in Georgia?
No, it's a turnout for both campaigns. You have to try to go to all 50 states. In fact, in Georgia, it is a Metro Atlanta versus an outside Metro Atlanta turnout. And that's what the Republicans are doing. They're pumping up the outside Metro Atlanta vote. Macon was a brilliant choice for President Trump to come in to rally that. And of course, that's how Brian Kemp won, although narrowly, but there's more turnout this year. And so I think it's the right plan. In fact, we again mentioned that website, GeorgiaVotes.com. Theron, you ought to be worried about DeKalb County as of Friday. The Democrat vote in predominantly Democratic DeKalb was way down from previous times. Now, yes, there is more early voting to come, but that surprised me.
Theron, we'll turn it over to you. You're on the Biden campaign team, we have to mention. We saw Jill Biden here this past week. Do you think we'll see the former vice president making an appearance in Georgia? And I'll let you answer to what Phil was talking about with DeKalb County, too.
Yeah, I sure hope so, Lori. You know, unlike and I sure hope so that we get former Vice President Biden to the state. But we feel very confident that we're going to get some more surrogates here very soon. But, you know, just to respond to Janelle's point first, you know, we don't want to have one of these Trump super spreader events. And so that's why you saw in DeKalb County, Dr. Jill Biden came here. We had everyone socially distanced. Big shout out to CEO Michael Thurman, who really went above and beyond to make sure that this event was safe and that we followed all the guidelines. And then as far as turnout, you know, Phil, I have a lot to worry about in life. One thing I'm not worried about is DeKalb County showing up and showing out. They have done it for decades. They have been the most Democratic county in the state of Georgia. And then lastly, let's not forget, let's push back on this notion that we're only focusing on Metro Atlanta. Dr. Jill Biden was also in Columbus, Georgia, where our good friend, State Representative Cal Mismari and Congressman Sanford Bishop hosted a veterans event there. And so you're going to continue to see the Biden campaign not only focus on metro areas, but also focus all over state. And the last thing we're going to do, Lori, is to have one of these Trump super spreader events where people walk out of there with COVID-19.
All right, so Janelle, I want to end this block with you, and I want you to respond because you are going to the Trump event Friday. At the time of this taping, we're taping Friday morning. You know, the mask issue has been such a big one. We saw it in the Thursday night town hall meeting with Trump. Will you be wearing a mask? And what do you think about, you know, Theron calling these super spreader events?
And be careful,
I think it's just seeing it talking points. I think it's just seeing it. I don't know why he's cutting me off, but I thought we were supposed to not speak over each other, right? I was
telling you to be careful.
When it comes to this whole, he's doing it again. So when it comes to this whole super spreader comment, that's a CNN talking point. We are required to wear masks when we come in, when we're sitting in the audience. And then we're going to be at a hangar. We're going to be outside, outdoors. Like I said, we push personal responsibility. No one has said not to follow CDC guidelines. We always follow the guidelines. And that is exactly why we don't see super spreading coming out of these coming out during this COVID time, coming out of these events. So, I just think that's just ridiculous. And I just wish we would kind of lay off on the CNN talking points.
Theron, last word.
Well, I do have the pleasure of going on CNN, Janelle, and I was genuinely saying be careful. I know you were on CSNBC this week as well, so we both do a lot of national appearances without talking points. I think the bottom line here is that Democrats are following the rules. We're encouraging our voters to attend events where you are socially distant to not only protect yourself, but protect others and protect your kids. I think what voters are going to see in Georgia and Macon is a rally with majority of people not wearing masks. And I just think that the President of the United States of America, who, by the way, has tested positive, now I guess is tested negative. We don't know when that actual testing occurred. of coronavirus. And so we just want people to be safe.
All right, last word, guys. Thank you so much.
Some of Kamala's aides have tested positive as well. We seem to not talk about any of that. So it seems like only Republicans get talked about when they get positive results.
All right.
That
Final word, everybody. I'm cutting you all off. Coming up, the money is pouring into Georgia's 2 U.S. Senate races, and we'll discuss the latest poll numbers next.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
A Quinnipiac poll out this week in Senate race number 1 here shows Democrat Jon Ossoff jumping ahead of the Republican incumbent David Perdue by 7 points. Phil, lots of folks here are questioning the accuracy of this poll, but Ossoff reported this week the largest ever fundraising quarter for a U.S. Senate race in Georgia, $21 million. Money doesn't mean everything, but it can mean momentum. Your thoughts?
Ossoff certainly is raising money. You can't take that away from him, but the Quinnipiac poll is just terrible. You heard me talk last week about looking at the crosstabs. They were wrong in 2016 in predicting. They were wrong in 2018. This poll's an outlier. I don't know why media outlets bother to use it. There are other Democratic pollsters that are far more reliable along with Republican pollsters. And so I do think that, again, as I was talking earlier in the program, I'm very heartened by turnout in a lot of these traditionally Republican counties around the state. And I think obviously the fact that Trump seems to be getting momentum, there is one poll, if you want to believe it or not, but it was 65%. It was Gallup. Now they've been pretty good for the last 30 years, saying 65% of respondents like Trump on the economy and counting on him for an economic recovery. And so I think there's Trump momentum. We talked about the Trump rally in Macon, and we're talking about the fact that the economy and Amy Coney Barrett, Trump had a good week. She did a good job, and it reminded people that the Republicans get in judges that don't make the law, they interpret the law.
Okay, but I want to go back to Ossoff and Perdue. Kathy, these two had quite a testy debate this week. Senator Perdue kept up his attacks on Ossoff, saying he would do anything to hide his radical socialist agenda. That's a message that plays to Republicans for sure, but do you think it plays to independents?
No, because I think anytime anybody says radical socialist agenda, they're just doing the dog whistle. They're not talking about policy. They're not talking about anything that matters. I've been in Democratic politics my entire career, and never once have I been at a briefing, a private one, where we've talked about the radical socialist agenda. So just know that I think people are really hungry for ideas. I think people are really hungry for policy. But I want to talk a little bit about that poll, because one of the things that I've been saying each week is that what we're looking at is trends of polls. We're not looking at any given poll, because those are just snapshots in time. They all have their little vagaries. What we are seeing is that the Democrats are pulling slightly ahead, and what is interesting about this poll to me, and maybe somebody can chalk it up to an anomaly, but what you're seeing are the Democratic senatorial candidates are tracking Biden's numbers, and the Republicans are stuck at Trump's numbers, which says to me that people are holding those senatorial candidates responsible for, kind of aligning them with Trump, and they're having a hard time breaking for that. Couple that with 55 to 60% of the absentee ballots that have been returned by people who primarily vote Democratic. You're seeing a really, really strong trend that upsets these Senate races dramatically. We may see them in January, but I think those numbers are more surprising than what I would have suggested even a month ago.
Janelle, let's continue on this poll trend. Let's talk about Senate race number 2. Raphael Warnock at 41%, according to the Quinnipiac poll, followed by Doug Collins, and then, of course, incumbent Republican Kelly Loeffler. You are honorary co-chair of her campaign. How do you interpret these numbers between Collins and Loeffler?
So I interpret it as another reason why we need to see Collins back out. And this is why, because when you combine the numbers, that will put the Republicans ahead.
Janelle, that's not going to happen. Okay, so let's talk about these numbers and why they're so close. We know that Collins is not going to drop out. So let's be realistic and talk about the numbers. Why are they so close with so much money being spent by the Loeffler campaign and all of the PACs for her?
So I don't work for the Collins campaign. I can't tell you why or where their funding is coming from, what they're doing with their funding. What I'm saying is the reason why I feel as though this is a huge issue for us is because of the fact that it's going to come down to dollars at the end of the day. So like I said, I don't trust polls in general. So I can't speak on where these polls are coming from. But I will say that Senator Loeffler has been leading him in numerous polls that prior to this. So at the end of the day, I'm looking at the dollars because we have a lot of Republican candidates who are struggling financially. So when we have candidate Senator Loeffler who can fund her own campaign, I think that puts her in a better position to go up against Warnock, who's getting money just loaded up on him, and it's going to continue to happen as we go into the runoff.
So Theron, let me ask you, because something that is a possibility that we haven't. Kathy, do you want to say something there?
Well, go finish your thought. I do have something to say about that.
I do want to talk about this possibility that we could have 2 Senate runoffs in Georgia. Senate race number 2 is a shoo-in for a runoff with so many candidates in this jungle election. But there's a Libertarian in Senate race number 1, Shane Hazel. If this race is close and Ossoff nor Perdue gets 50% plus 1, I mean, can you imagine what January could look like in Georgia, Theron?
Well, I'll be real quick, Kathy, give you some time to respond. I think, Lori, if that happens, we need to buckle our chin straps because Georgia will be on fire. Not only will there be hundreds of millions of dollars spent here if we have 2 U.S. Senate runoffs, but it could determine the power, which party is actually in power in the U.S. Senate. And so I really want Democrats to win, but if we make it to the runoff, I think that's a challenge because we know that historically we have not done as well as we should in runoffs. However, I think this race is different, the climate is different, and I think ultimately we can be very competitive. But Kathy, I'll turn over to you because I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, go ahead, Kathy.
Sure. Well, listen, if we have 2 Senate races or even if we have 1 in a runoff, which is almost assured, then it's likely that control of the Senate will come down to Georgia in January. So that's going to put the spotlight on us even more. But what I want to say about the Collins-Loeffler race is, again, looking at the trends, Loeffler has been leading just a little bit, but in recent weeks she seems to be falling behind in the polls, and that's despite a humongous financial advantage. So something is turning off Republican voters and either keeping them from supporting any Republican candidate, or they're shifting slightly over to Collins. Collins will have every dollar he needs in a runoff in January to get a race. So I don't think that that's an advantage to say that Loeffler's money is going to somehow help her in January. I think Collins is going to pull it out. I think people have seen his record both here as a state legislator and also in Congress. It's not a record I like, but I think he's been more effective about talking about the issues. And again, I think Loeffler's been talking about the dog whistles, and nobody wants to hear that anymore.
Phil, I'll let you have the last word about the Republicans in these races. 20 seconds, please.
I do think that Collins is probably picking up some support, especially with Republican strength in the rural areas that I was talking about earlier. Yes, Theron is right. He knows his history like I do. Traditionally, Democrats don't do well in runoffs in January. Now, that could change with a lot of money coming in, but the vote does fall off. And it could be the Democrat votes falling off.
All right, lively debate, everybody. Thank you. Coming up, we'll have more health care options for Georgians, so we'll discuss straight ahead.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
We are making insurance acceptable to those who need it the most. That's what Governor Brian Kemp had to say at his press conference announcing his health care plan that won the okay from the feds. Kathy, this one includes a work requirement for another 50,000 Georgians to be eligible for Medicaid. If the goal is to get more Georgians insured, tell us why Democrats were out of the gate criticizing this plan.
Well, this was a political stunt. It is no coincidence that 2 weeks after the comment period ended, we have the head of the Medicaid service down here with this press conference. October 22nd, Southwest Regional Medical Center is going to close in Randolph County because they don't have enough insured patients. This plan is going to cover maybe 60,000 people over 5 years. If you're a single parent with 2 kids and you make $11 an hour, you won't qualify for this. This is ridiculous. This is not Medicaid expansion. This is just, maybe a couple more people are going to get some insurance. And it's really unfortunate because we have over 500,000 people who could qualify if we did Medicaid expansion, and we get a 90% reimbursement for the federal government. We're not getting that money, and more rural hospitals are going to close.
Phil, you could say that this is a type of Medicaid expansion under Obamacare, but what do you think about Kathy's interpretation here?
No, I don't call it a type of Medicaid expansion under Obamacare. Remember, these are two waivers that are very welcomed. They're waivers from expensive and tyrannical Obamacare. And I know Kathy doesn't like competition and lower insurance costs and the market doing all of this, but that's exactly what's going to happen. And it's going to help low-income Georgians, especially. It's going to help hundreds of thousands of Georgians with more health care options. The Republicans ought to be rejoicing, and this is going to bring in a lot of independents. I don't know where Kathy gets her figures. She doesn't know what plans are going to be picked up by how many Georgians, but it's out there for people that didn't have the options. You remember under Obamacare, all too many people didn't have their plans. They were taken away, and they didn't keep their own doctors. This is great.
Theron, weigh in here because the governor says that this will reduce premiums for hundreds of thousands of Georgians. Your thoughts?
Well, I agree with what Kathy said. I mean, listen, many Democrats have said that we believe that we should have a full Medicaid expansion in Georgia. And you've really looked to what Kathy said, it's the requirements. And so we know that there's roughly about 400,000 people in Georgia that, because of the Affordable Care Act, was able to actually opt into a plan, a health care plan. What stands to happen is what happens to those plans that these 400,000 people are able to get adequate and affordable health care from. And so, listen, I've said before, I think Governor Kemp, this was a right step in the right direction. I commended him for doing this, but I do think we need to be working towards full Medicaid expansion.
Janelle, what do you think about the fact that the Democrats are saying this just doesn't go nearly far enough to insure Georgians?
I mean, I'm not quite sure what the Democrats want. It sounds like if one or two people are helped, that's a benefit, and that's awesome. This is going to help so much more. This just shows that Republicans do care about health care, and it kind of beats into the narrative that the Democrats want to spread, that Republicans don't care about people, when they do. We just care about doing it and finding right solutions that will benefit everyone.
Kathy, last word on this.
Well, it's not going to cover people. That's what the challenge is we have the option to challenge people. And this has a work requirement at a time when people can't find jobs. The poorest people in our state are the people that don't have insurance, and now they're going to be required to work and pay premiums on policies that they're not going to be able to afford. It just doesn't do anything. It's really unfortunate.
All right, well, I want to delve into this in the weeks to come, but we're out of time right now. So thanks, everybody, because coming up, we still have winners and losers to get to. Stay tuned.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
I always wish we had more time, but Kathy, we'll start with you.
Okay, listen, I'm going to use some sports terms. Good assist by the Atlanta Hawks in putting up their giant State Farm Arena voting opportunity for people in Fulton County, and good recovery by Fulton County Elections. You can go to fultonelections.com and find out the wait time of the voting precinct that you want to visit and make your voting experience better. Also, shout out to Killer Mike for winning the Billboard Changemakers Award and for his announcement on opening a bank to help support black businesses.
Who would have thought the Fulton County Board of Elections, yes, the Board of Elections in Fulton County, a winner on the Georgia Gang. Let's hope it stays. And over to Janelle.
Shout out to the Atlanta Braves. I know we're at the time of the taping, we have a game tonight, but as of right now, they're one game away from the World Series. And I do have a loser this week, Joe Biden. Last night at the debate, he said that the 1994 crime bill was a mistake. And I just feel like I wish he would have thought about the thousands of people that are impacted and the families that were destroyed prior to voting for it and drafting it. So he's my loser.
All right, Phil, over to you.
Well, the University System of Georgia Board of Regents is my winner because they voted unanimously to keep returning to in-person student classes. That is very important. And, of course, loser, the Falcons, and let's hope the Braves keep winning.
All right. Well, y'all gave Theron a lot of time left. I still got 1:30 in the show, Theron, so go ahead.
All right. Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to make a winner, Bishop Barbara King, who unfortunately, Lori, passed this week. She was the bishop at Hillside Chapel and Truth Center. As Mayor Bottom said, she was a beacon of just spiritual reckoning and just really a person that really instilled a lot of faith in a lot of people and was a leader in the African American community in all her church efforts. And also, I want to make a winner this week, again, the poll workers, the people who actually were there on the front lines dealing with these long lines. I want to encourage them to keep up the good work. And then lastly, Paul Millsap, who's a Denver Nugget basketball player, former Atlanta Hawks, opened up his Care for Atlanta facility for early voting in DeKalb County. So definitely want to make him a winner in the county this week.
All right, thanks everybody. And my winner this week is Mr. Rick Jackson. He's a client, a mentor, but most importantly, he's a friend. And he had an interchange named after him this week up in Alpharetta by Senator Brandon Beach. It's the Rick Jackson Interchange. This is a man who went from being a foster child and growing up in tech homes to building a healthcare staffing empire, being very, very successful, but also giving so much back to the community. So well deserved, and congratulations to him. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We will see you again next week.